I've been studying out faith these past few days, and I've been really getting into this Jesus walking on the water. So let's touch on this. The title of my charge is "The Wind, the Waves, and the Word." Verse 25, chapter 14. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it's I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, which I'm sure the other apostles were like, "Peter, he didn't say come, he said you're dumb. Stop asking that question."
That's true.
Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink and cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" What struck me here, we read this story over and over and over again. This is not a new story. But verse 30, but when he saw the wind. Anybody ever see the wind?
No.
You can't see you can see the effects of the wind.
Yeah.
And so as I was digging, I looked at some other translations, and there's a bunch of other translations that say the wind and the waves. And they use the waves or the effects of the wind.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but why does it say here just wind? So I dug a little deeper. There is no other word than wind in this passage.
Wind.
You can dig all the way down to the original language, and it's just wind.
Okay.
So what is the deal? So I came across in the Message translation, the same passage.
That's a good one.
In verse 29 he says, "Come ahead." Jumping out of the boat, Peter walked on the water to Jesus. But when he looked down at the waves churning beneath his feet, he lost his nerve and started to sink. He cried, "Master, save me." Think about this, okay? He's walking on water. We immediately want to hop from 29 to 30. But he's literally walking on the water. Then he looks as he's walking, and he sees underneath his feet. He's not sinking yet. Underneath his feet, he sees the churning of the water. And then he goes, "Oh, snap, I'm walking on water." This is scary. This is freaking me out. How many of you have ever been having success in your ministry, and you took your eyes off of Jesus and started looking at yourself walking on the water?
Wow.
Dang. You started looking at yourself walking on the water. See, when he took his eyes off Jesus and started focusing on himself walking on the water, he began to sink. He began to sink. But here's what's really interesting to me. Go to Mark 6.
Come on, bro.
Go to Mark 6.
Come on, bro.
Who wrote the book of Mark?
Mark. Peter. Really, Peter.
Peter.
Yeah.
Mark transcribed it, but Peter wrote the book of Mark. So you would think the apex of the coolness of Peter walking on the water, we would find it right here, but take a look. Chapter 6, in verse 47. When evening came, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. On the fourth watch of the night, he went out to them walking on the lake. He was about to pass by, but when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately he spoke to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." When he climbed into the boat with them and the wind died down, they were completely amazed. There's no mention here in Peter's account of him walking on the water. Why? Why? Because it's not about him walking on the water.
Wow.
In fact, it's not even about his failure of sinking. Because if you go back really quickly to chapter 16 or 14, he says, immediately Jesus reached out in verse 31 and caught him. In verse 32, and when they climbed into the boat. So there was a time when he and Jesus were just talking about faith. Why did you doubt before they even got into the boat? The point isn't our success or our failure. The point is Jesus getting in the boat with us.
Come on.
The point is Jesus in our ministry. It's not about the wind. It's not about the waves. It's about the word. Amen.
Come on.